Welcome to Psyche Talks. Today, we're diving deep into a truly important area, how trauma impacts our brains, our minds, and our very bodies.
Yeah, these experiences, they leave a lasting mark.
Definitely. And we're going to explore what the latest science reveals about how healing actually becomes possible.
Our exploration today, it really centers on the work of a psychiatrist who has spent, well, decades dedicated to understanding and treating trauma. Their insights come from years working with all sorts of people, Vietnam veterans, survivors of childhood abuse, you name it.
Right. And we're drawing on their book, which brings together all that clinical practice and research from a trauma center they founded.
Hmm.
So, our mission today is to really unpack how trauma fundamentally changes our physiology, the way we see the world, and, our ability to connect
Yeah,
with ourselves and with others.
going beyond that surface level, really.
Exactly, getting to the core biological and psychological shifts.
Okay.
Okay, so to start, what kicks off those really intense reactions we see in people who've been through trauma?
Well, trauma sets off these powerful physical sensations, really difficult emotions, and sometimes impulsive actions.
Okay.
But the key thing to understand is that this isn't random. It's rooted in disturbed brain circuits
Yeah.
and this massive release of stress
So it's
hormones.
a biological cascade.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And these reactions can feel totally overwhelming, almost incomprehensible sometimes.
Mm.
It can lead survivors to believe, very painfully, that they're somehow damaged at their core.
That's devastating. It's striking, too, how our understanding of the body has evolved. You mentioned early on we had a decent grasp of physical organs, but mental health felt different.
Exactly. Think about it. Doctors were mapping out the liver, the heart, all the intricate details.
Yeah.
But the origins of mental health problems, that remained largely a mystery for a long time.
Right.
But then we saw the emergence of fields like neuroscience,
Mhm.
developmental psychopathology, which looks at how disorders develop over time, and interpersonal neurobiology.
How our brains and relationships interact.
Precisely. And all this has brought about a huge leap in knowledge,
Yeah.
especially about the impact of psychological trauma, abuse, and neglect. It's been revolutionary, really.
So what are some of the actual, physiological changes, the physical stuff that happens in the body?
Trauma causes very real physical changes.
Mhm.
If you look at the big picture, it's like the brain's alarm system gets recalibrated,
Yeah.
becomes much more sensitive.
Always on alert.
Yeah, pretty much. We also see increased stress hormone activity and changes in how the brain filters information, what it tunes into, what it blocks out.
Okay.
And crucially, trauma compromises the brain area responsible for that basic physical feeling of being alive,
Yeah.
that sense of being present in your own skin.
Wow. That sounds incredibly deep.
Yeah.
How does that show up in someone's day-to-day life, their behavior?
Well, these changes explain a lot. Hypervigilance, that constant scanning for danger.
Feeling unsafe all the time.
Right. Difficulty really engaging in everyday life, sometimes repeating the same problematic patterns over and over.
Like being stuck.
Exactly. And trouble learning from experience. But the source really emphasizes this. These aren't signs of a moral failing or a weak character.
No.
These are the direct results of actual biological changes in the brain.
That's such an important distinction. Not character flaws, but biological consequences. So if the changes are that profound, what avenues do we have for healing?
The source outlines three fundamental pathways. First, there's a top-down approach.
Talking therapy.
Yeah, talking, reconnecting with people, processing the memories consciously. Then there's medication, or sometimes technology-based interventions.
What do they do?
They can help sort of shut down those overactive alarm reactions, or maybe help reorganize how the brain is processing things.
Okay. And the third?
That's the bottom-up approach. This focuses on body-based experiences, the things that directly contradict the feelings left by the trauma, like helplessness or rage or that feeling of collapse.
So working directly with the body's experience.
Precisely. Experiences that teach the body safety on a physical level.
Is one approach better than the others?
Not usually, no. What the source suggests is that for most individuals, the most effective path involves a combination of these. It needs to be tailored, to their specific needs and experiences.
Makes sense. The book you mentioned draws on decades of experience. What were some of the early observations that really started shaping this understanding of trauma?
Well, early on, working at a VA clinic with Vietnam veterans, it revealed this really heartbreaking patterns.
What was that?
Individuals seem trapped in the past, just unable to fully move on. And what's fascinating is rediscovering the work of Abram Kardner.
From World War I.
Yeah, he studied veterans back then and described what he called traumatic neurosis of war. It's basically what we now call PTSD. He saw the same core issues: futility, withdrawal, that chronic vigilance.
And he had a key insight about its nature, didn't he?
He did. Gardner called it a physioneurosis. He reckoned that there wasn't just psychological in the head. It had a fundamental physiological basis.
The body was reacting.
The body's entire system was reacting. And our source really emphasizes how vital it is to learn directly from patients, even when it's incredibly difficult to face those realities and to face the lies we tell ourselves, as the psychiatrist Elvin Semrad put it so well.
Facing reality is hard, and the source touches on just how difficult it can be for people to even talk about traumatic experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Sarah Haley's work is crucial here. She highlighted the immense difficulty of both speaking about and listening to wartime atrocities and the profound shame
Shame about what happened.
about what happened, but also about what one did or didn't do to survive. And we see the same kind of shame in survivors of child abuse, shame about survival actions and the confusing need to stay connected to abusers. It creates this terrible tangle of love and terror.
That's incredibly complex, and a major symptom that often comes up is emotional numbness, right?
Yes, emotional numbness is a huge obstacle. It makes it hard to connect with family, friends, even oneself, like living behind a glass wall, you know?
Unable to feel things fully.
Exactly. The source points out that even people who look successful on the outside can feel like they're just observing their own lives, not really participating, watching from a distance.
It's not just emotions, though. It affects really fundamental things like imagination, perception.
Totally. Trauma can impact imagination, leading to a loss of mental flexibility, difficulty envisioning a better future. You can even see hints of this in things like Rorschach test results.
Wow.
And beyond that, traumatized individuals often perceive the world differently. Neutral things can feel threatening because of past experiences. Their threat radar is just dialed way up.
It sounds like the early attempts to treat trauma faced some pretty big hurdles.
They really did. Early on at the VA, resources were scarce, waiting lists were incredibly long.
Frustrating.
Very. And even the idea of seriously studying PTSD initially met resistance within the institution. This eventually led the source to move to the Massachusetts Mental Health Center. And there, the understanding started to broaden beyond combat.
To other kinds of trauma.
Yes, particularly the impact on women with histories of sexual abuse and family violence.
And there was a gap between textbooks and reality, especially with childhood trauma.
A huge gap. Textbooks back then really underestimated how common incest was and how devastating its psychological effects could be. Clinicians were seeing patients with profound depression, confusion, self-harm, people deeply affected by these experiences that the books barely mentioned.
It's striking to hear about those parallels: combat trauma, childhood trauma.
The overlap in symptoms is undeniable. Nightmares, flashbacks, emotional shutdown, rage, huge difficulties with relationships.
It's the same pattern.
Very similar patterns. This recognition was vital. It showed that war isn't the only thing that causes life-altering trauma. Violent crime,
Right.
rape, child abuse. These are major contributors too.
And arguably even more complex when the source of terror is a caregiver.
Exactly. When the people supposed to protect you are the source of danger, that's incredibly damaging.
Thankfully, our understanding has moved forward quite a bit, especially with neuroscience.
Oh, tremendously. Since the early 90s, brain imaging tools, they've allowed us to learn so much about how trauma impacts us and how healing can happen.
Seeing inside the brain.
Right. And the really crucial takeaway is that trauma isn't just a bad memory you leave in the past. It leaves an imprint. Mind, brain, body. It has ongoing consequences for how we navigate the present. It fundamentally reorganizes how our mind and brain manage perceptions. It affects how we think.
So talking about it is important, but maybe not the whole story.
Finding the words is incredibly meaningful, yes. But it often isn't enough on its own to change those automatic physical responses, those hormonal surges that got wired in.
Right, the body's reaction.
For real change, the body itself needs to learn that the danger is over. It needs to learn how to live safely in the present.
The journey to understand this involves some big shifts in psychiatry too, didn't it?
Absolutely. Our source talks about early experiences as a ward attendant during a time when treatment was really shifting, moving more from psychotherapy towards medication, and observing patients. Sometimes these late-night confessions would come out, revealing histories of abuse, neglect, stuff often missed in the formal case discussions that focus more on just managing symptoms.
Not getting to the root cause.
Often not. And treatments like electroshock, while maybe intended to help, could also erase personal stories, memories.
And there were hints even then about the mind-body connection.
Definitely. Think about Eugene Bleuler noticing that hallucinations in schizophrenia might actually be fragmented memories of real experiences.
Wow.
It started blurring the lines between imagination and memory, especially when people reported very real physical sensations or voices linked to trauma, and realizing that maybe violent or self-destructive behavior wasn't just random, but a reaction to frustration, to feeling misunderstood.
But the focus was often on control.
Professional training often geared towards maintaining control, managing distress, rather than fully understanding its source. The source mentions the case of Sylvia, highlighting how good intentions could still lead to re-traumatization.
You also mentioned observing physical things, clumsiness, awkwardness.
Exactly. Things that didn't seem directly related, but later made sense through the lens of body-based therapies. It really showed trauma isn't just mental, it's held in the body.
And people like Elvin Semrad emphasized other aspects.
Yes, Semrad was influential. He stressed things like love, loss, acknowledging experience, the ability to bear reality, these being central to healing. He warned against the lies we tell ourselves
Self-honesty.
and connecting with lived experience, the body's visceral dimensions, as crucial for being in charge of your life. This was kind of counter to the rise of biological psychiatry, focusing heavily on neurotransmitters and the DSM classifications, which even the creators knew were, imprecise guides.
Yeah, this leads us to that fascinating area of learned helplessness and stress biology.
Right. The source describes being really struck by Stephen Meyer's presentation on learned helplessness in dogs.
The inescapable shock experiments.
Yes. The dogs were subjected to shocks they couldn't escape. Later, when they could escape, they didn't even try. They'd learned they were helpless.
And the parallel to humans.
It was undeniable.
Yeah.
That giving up, not fleeing even when possible, it mirrored what you see in severely traumatized humans. And biologically, the traumatized animals had elevated stress hormones, just like human trauma survivors.
Then Rachel Yehuda found low cortisol in PTSD. That seems odd.
It did seem counterintuitive at first. Cortisol is a major stress hormone. But the understanding evolved. Cortisol actually helps end the stress response, bring the body back to baseline.
Ah, okay.
In PTSD, it seems that system breaks down. The stress hormones don't shut off properly. They stay high, leading to agitation, panic, long-term health problems. The system fails to reset.
And the dogs had to be physically shown escape was possible.
Yes, Meyer and Sullivan had to literally drag the dogs away from the shock grids to teach them escape was an option. This suggests that for humans overwhelmed by trauma, sometimes actual physical experiences are needed to unlearn that helplessness.
And the attachment studies. Animals returning to unsafe places.
Yeah, that raised important questions. Scared animals often go back to what's familiar, even if it's dangerous. It makes you wonder why traumatized people might sometimes be drawn back into harmful situations.
Which brings up that really puzzling thing. The attraction to trauma or repetition compulsion.
Exactly. Observing veterans who seem to almost come alive when talking about traumatic events.
Like Chris Hedges said about war giving meaning.
Sort of connected, yeah. Some traumatized individuals feel drawn to experiences others would avoid. They might feel empty, bored, unless they're in high-stress or dangerous situations.
The source mentions Julia.
Yes, a woman who, after a rape, kept getting into violent relationships. Freud called it the compulsion to repeat, maybe an unconscious attempt at mastery.
But it doesn't usually work out that way.
No, the evidence suggests it mostly leads to more pain. So why? Why the attraction? Research suggests activities causing fear or pain can trigger endorphins.
Like morphine.
Similar effect. Natural painkillers, mood elevators. It could offer temporary, though ultimately unhelpful, relief from deeper anxiety or numbness.
And neurotransmitters like serotonin play a big role in fear.
Huge role.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Gray's work on the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, showed how serotonin levels influence it. Low serotonin is linked to being more reactive to stress.
More easily triggered.
Right. Higher levels tend to dampen fear. This might help explain why traumatized individuals can overreact to minor things or be very sensitive to rejection. Even monkey studies show links between social status and serotonin, highlighting how our environment and brain chemistry interact.
Which connects to social difficulties after trauma.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So given all this complexity, the brain changes, the body's memory, the neurotransmitters, it's clear medication alone isn't the whole answer, is it?
Seems unlikely for most people.
That's a really key point from the source. Meds can help manage symptoms, absolutely, but they often can't fully address the deep impact. Real healing needs to engage fundamental human dimensions. Language expressing experience, understanding brain function, body awareness and regulation, and crucially, safe social environments. feeling connected.
Moving from patient to participant.
Exactly. Fostering community and inner sense of self. It's about active participation in recovery.
The neuroscience revolution, especially brain imaging, really changed the game, didn't it?
Oh, completely transformed it. PET scans, fMRI. Starting in the early 90s, it could finally see brain activity during tasks, during memory recall.
Looking inside the engine.
Right. And it gave us incredible insights into what trauma actually does to the brain.
One really striking finding was about language, Broca's area.
Yes, that was huge. Seeing decreased activity in Broca's area of the speech center during flashbacks.
So literally becoming speechless.
It provides visual proof. The effects of psychological trauma can look similar on a scan to physical damage, like a stroke affecting speech. It underlines the pre-verbal nature of much trauma experiences happening before language can fully capture them.
Like Shakespeare's speechless terror.
A perfect description. Think about common reactions. Screaming, shutting down, going mute. Trauma cuts us off from language, from shared understanding. We might develop cover stories, narratives that don't quite capture the inner reality.
And during these moments, the emotional brain takes over.
Absolutely. Trauma fires up the limbic system, the emotional brain, often overriding the rational frontal lobes. People re-experiencing the past might not even consciously connect it to the trauma. They just feel intense emotion, then look for an external cause.
Blaming something current.
Right. Neuroscience shows many psychological issues start in these deeper regions, driving perception and attention. That's why insight alone, just understanding it intellectually, often isn't enough to silence the alarm bells.
That tug of war you mentioned.
Yeah, between the emotional and rational brain. It leads to physical discomfort, psychological misery.
Brain scans also revealed that timeless reliving and dissociation too.
Exactly. Scans of someone like Marcia, recalling an accident years later, showed her brain's alarm system firing as if it were happening right now. Increased heart rate, blood pressure, the whole physiological response.
The body remembers.
And stress hormones take longer to come down, spiking disproportionately to minor stress. This fuels memory issues, irritability, sleep problems, long-term health risks.
What about denial?
That's another response. The conscious mind tries to ignore the signals, but the body keeps reacting physiologically. Drugs or alcohol might numb it temporarily, but don't fix the underlying issue.
So many layers.
And you can look at someone's reaction in a scanner from different angles. Neurochemical imbalance, hypersensitized memories, the limits of talk therapy alone. The limbic system is about survival, and its connection to the frontal lobes gets shaky under intense emotion.
And Stan and Hugh Lawrence showed different responses.
A great example, Stan's brain lit up in sensory and emotional areas, vivid reliving. Youth's showed dissociation blank areas, a shutting down of awareness to cope.
Reliving versus shutting down.
Two common but very different ways the brain tries to handle overwhelming experience.
So trauma really does rewire the brain's threat system.
Fundamentally, body keeps reacting as if in danger, often without a conscious link to the past event. Healing isn't just accepting the past, it's gaining mastery over those internal sensations, those overwhelming emotions.
Where do you even start?
Often the first step is just learning to sense, name, and identify what's happening inside. Recognizing those internal states.
Being aware.
Because as we saw with Stan reliving and you dissociating, these altered states have huge consequences for daily life. Difficulty being present. Sometimes, paradoxically, the traumatic memories feel like the only times one felt intensely alive, even if it was horrific.
So desensitization isn't the only goal.
It's part of it, but not the whole picture. The source argues strongly for helping patients live fully and securely now. That means bringing those overwhelmed brain structures back online, allowing for satisfaction and joy in everyday life again.
Which leads us to those critical body-brain connections.
Yes, life is rhythm. The body is a rhythm machine. Darwin's work on emotional expression showed how tied our inner states are to physical manifestations, face, posture, voice tone.
And mirror neurons.
They let us register others' inner states, and our bodies adjust unconsciously. Feeling safe in relationships is key for relaxation, nourishment, restoration. Our brains evolve for tribal living. Connecting with others is fundamental.
So mental suffering often involves relationship trouble or arousal issues.
Or both. And the standard medical focus on drugs can sometimes distract from these core relational and regulatory needs. Feeling safe with others, that's foundational for mental health. Social support is the biggest predictor of recovery after disasters.
And Porges's polyvagal theory helps explain the body's alarm system, neuroception.
Exactly. It explains how our autonomic nervous system shifts between states based on perceived safety. Neuroception is that unconscious evaluation. Am I safe? Is there danger?
And trauma messes with that system.
It can make the neuroception faulty. Survival mechanisms start working against us. The goal becomes resetting it, helping people respond appropriately to real danger, but also recovering the capacity for safety, relaxation, connection.
Those different trauma responses, focused, collapsed, frantic.
Porges maps those onto three main physiological states: social engagement, calm, connected; fight, flight, mobilize defense; and freeze, collapse, immobilization when overwhelmed.
Immobilization seems key.
It's often at the root: slowed heart rate, shallow breathing, dissociation, collapse. The dorsal vagal complex is involved there. Normally, our defense systems need to dial down for intimacy, rest. Trauma can keep them stuck on high alert or shut down in numbness.
The malfunctioning smoke detector.
Perfect analogy. It impairs enjoyment and detecting real danger. The ACE study links early adversity to later revictimization, highlighting this challenge in discerning safety. Healing requires experiences that restore physical safety.
So polyvagal theory points to new treatment approaches.
Absolutely. It helps us understand how to deactivate chronic fight, flight, or shutdown. It explains why diverse techniques work: therapeutic yoga, theater, martial arts, play, sensory work.
Things that engage the body.
Yes, combining top-down, social engagement, and bottom-up, calming the body, is often key. It validates ancient practices: breathwork, chanting, drumming, dance. They use rhythm, visceral awareness, vocal facial communication to shift states.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. Trauma lives in the viscera: emotions, autoimmune issues, muscles. Mind-brain viscera communication is the royal road to regulation. It demands a shift in thinking.
And this ties into losing your body, losing yourself, that feeling of disconnect.
Yes. Think of Harry's slumped, fearful posture. Talk therapy focusing only on insight can miss the relevance of the living body. You might understand an impulse, like Sherry's skin picking, but still not be able to control it.
Feeling numb in parts of the body.
Very common. Difficulty with proprioception. Integrating sensory input. Muffled senses make you feel less alive. William James called it sensory insensibility. Healing involves reintegrating ordinary sensations to feel secure and whole.
And the default state network, DSN, the idling brain.
Lanius's research shifted focus there. The DSN is vital for self-awareness, especially sensory self-awareness. Those midline structures, the mohawk of self-awareness, are active at rest in healthy people, involved in physical self-sense, internal GPS, connecting to feelings.
But not in chronic trauma.
Activity there is often sharply decreased. It's hard to register internal states, assess personal relevance. Shutting down these areas is a tragic adaptation to terror, but it also deadens the capacity to feel fully alive.
Affecting purpose, direction.
Potentially, yes. Linked to reduced medial prefrontal cortex activation. Impaired interconnection hinders decision-making. In severe childhood trauma, some can't recognize themselves in a mirror. Self-recognition brain structures are offline.
Knowing what you're doing, as Feldenkrais said.
You need that inner awareness to feel present, to achieve goals. Reactivating the self-sensing system is crucial. Sherry's positive response to massage illustrates this: relaxation, more engagement, stopping self-harm.
Damasio's work clarified body states, emotions, survival.
Yes, and the brain areas needed to feel what you feel. His levels of self-proto, core, autobiographical. Basic emotions mapping to the brainstem shows the body's foundational role.
An overwhelming threat activates that elementary self-system.
Leading to intense arousal, startle, sleep issues, loss of pleasure, then desperate attempts to shut down via freezing, dissociation. How much control do we have over these deep responses?
Agency seems key here, feeling in charge.
Exactly. Knowing you're standing, having a say. Frustrated veterans acting out might be attempts to assert lost agency. But real agency starts with interoception awareness of subtle body feelings.
Awareness leads to control.
Greater potential for it. Mindfulness strengthens the MPFC, the watchtower, aiding recovery. Think of penguins surviving hardships, incredible resilience, like trauma survivors, but maybe lacking that inner compass for the future.
Validating somatic therapy.
Yes, Levine, Ogden. Drawing out blocked sensations, befriending inner energy, completing thwarted self-preserving actions. Gut feelings signal safety or danger. A comfortable interconnection is vital for feeling in charge.
But traumatized people feel unsafe inside.
Chronically. Bombarded by warning signs, they might ignore gut feelings, numb awareness, leading to shutdown or panic with sensory shifts. Fear of the fear itself keeps panic going.
Scared, stiff, frozen, numb, literal descriptions.
Precisely. Lives held hostage until the visceral experience changes. Ignoring body messages means you can't detect real danger or safety. Self-regulation needs that friendly relationship with the body.
Or stress comes out physically, migraines, asthma.
Instead of conscious awareness, Sandy's deference linked to childhood neglect. This connects to alexithymia, difficulty identifying, describing emotions, common in trauma.
Experiencing emotions only as physical sensations.
Often, yes, linked to reduced activity in self-sensing brain areas. Leads to less nuanced responses, spacing out or rage without knowing why. Contributes to lack of self-protection, re-victimization. Difficulty feeling pleasure, meaning,
Can alexithymia improve?
yes, by learning to connect sensations and emotions, like learning shades of gray if colorblind. But the work is hard. Sometimes treating physical ailments feels easier than facing the trauma.
Depersonalization, too. Losing sense of self.
Common during trauma. The source shares a personal example from a mugging. Paul Schilder described the world feeling strange, emotions altered. Neuroscience can even induce out-of-body feelings.
And dissociative brains shut down fear centers during recall.
Research shows that, yes, fear centers go quiet. So
Yeah.
befriending the body is crucial. Becoming familiar with internal sensations. Angry people live in angry bodies. Tense bodies need to relax, feel safe.
Physical self-awareness is the first step.
Noticing, describing sensations beneath emotions. Pressure, heat, tension. Identifying pleasant sensations too. Paying attention to breath, gestures, body shifts.
Can this be difficult? Triggering.
It can be initially distressing,
Yeah.
potentially triggering somatic reenactments. The therapist's skill in managing this safely is vital to avoid re-traumatization. It's a skill nurses, teachers, even police often have soothing terror.
Meds just blunt sensations.
Without resolving the core issue, we naturally calm by clinging to others, but that's complex for abuse survivors terrified of touch, yet craving it. Re-educating the mind and body to tolerate, even enjoy, safe touch is part of healing.
Practice helps reconnect sensations and events.
Definitely. Connecting physical feelings to psychological events helps reconnect with oneself. Lanius' study on eye contact in trauma survivors is revealing.
Difficulty with eye contact, shame.
Indicators of distress. Scans showed direct gaze didn't activate curiosity, prefrontal cortex, but triggered primitive survival areas, periaqueductal gray. Social engagement areas didn't fire up.
Impacting relationships, trust.
Hugely. Making friends, trusting therapists, it's all harder. Healing involves seeing others as separate, with their own intentions, while also standing up for yourself. Trauma blurs those boundaries. So today's deep dive has really shown a light on the profound, far-reaching effects of trauma, hasn't it? How deeply it imprints on our physical and psychological selves.
Absolutely. And we've seen how cutting-edge neuroscience is giving us these crucial insights into the changes, but also pointing towards, innovative ways to heal.
The journey of understanding is definitely ongoing.
Yeah, and we hope this exploration has given you, the listener, a deeper appreciation for the challenges survivors face, but also for that remarkable potential for recovery.
The sheer complexity of the brain and body's response just underscores how important holistic approaches are. Addressing the mind, sure, but also our physical sensations, our need for safe connection.
It really is the whole picture.
This is truly just the beginning of a much larger conversation, though.
Definitely. We encourage you to explore the resources, the research we've touched on, and just keep seeking knowledge about this really critical aspect of human experience.
Thank you for your support and for listening.